my drink's not even warm. Alright, I'm gonna give everybody a second to get on here. Give me a minute to get my drink all warmed up. Okay. Sorry about that. I was running a little late. I was helping my brother move some large appliances. But we're good now. Maybe. I'm just settling down. Hey, we already got 2 people right off the bat. That's awesome. Ooh! Okay. Oh, dang. Twiggy Smash finally. Yeah, I know. Taking some time. Taking some good time. Helping family is amazing. I mean, that's what family is for. That's part of what family is for. And I love my family. I really do. My family's great. Best family in the world. That is not subjective at all. That is 100%, 1000% an objective statement. My family is the best. No bias here. Alright. Okay, let's take a breather. Gotta get my brain juices flowing, you know. Take another sip of this good old drink. That's good. Another one. Okay. I'm ready. So to get this all started off, okay? I'm a fan of metal. I'm a fan of metal and punk, honestly. Hard music that most people don't really like. Most people don't really like. It's grating. It's hard on the ears. You can't understand what they're saying. It's lots of, heavy, hard sounds. It's usually really fast-paced as well. Not a lot of people get into it, but like most people, I started coming into my own with music. 13, 14 years old. That's when I started finding some things. I remember the first time I heard a hard rock song on the radio. It was actually it's a song called "Alone" by a band called the Prom Kings, which are not around anymore. This was forever ago. Again, if I was 14, it was 2006, something around there. And in the place I was living in Montana, they had a new rock radio station, and it just came on one time, and I really enjoyed it. It was so good. That was probably when I was more like 12 or 13, and then I was getting into between 14 and 15 years old. I was listening to the radio, that same channel, and Bullet for My Valentine's Tears Don't Fall came on. Now at the time, I didn't know who this band was. I didn't know what this song was. I didn't know anything about these bands. I had cousins that kind of listened to punk and metal, but I wasn't around them very often, and they were a little older than me, so I wasn't into most of it, you know? But Bullet for My Valentine comes on. Hey, 4 people, like, way early. Dang, guys. Be careful, I'm gonna actually be famous. Just kidding. I will never get famous. But anyway, so Bullet for My Valentine comes on. Tears Don't Fall. And there was just something about it. just about the this sound that it just really hit me. I can even remember just the bass guitar riff. For whatever reason, I thought it sounded like Arcleon. Well, to be fair, two of them were me. Oh. Yeah. Oh, dang. Dang, Shane. That's fine. But anyway, so I was listening to Bullet for My Valentine. Something just spoke to me about it, you know? And I remember after, it was late at night when I heard it, and I was just laying in bed afterwards, just sitting there, trying to remember the sounds that I heard, because it was just so good. Oh, that's a cliff. But I didn't know the name of the band, I didn't know where to look, I had no idea. Fast forward, maybe half a year later, I get an artificial viewer. Dang it, Shane. How dare you. Whatever, though. But fast forward a couple months later, and I am hanging out with one of my cousins. One of those said cousins whose elder brethren, whose older siblings, listen to hardcore music. And he had... It wasn't an iPod. It was an MP3 player. We weren't that cool. And he connected them to some speakers, and he started playing his music. He started playing his hard music. And Bullet for My... Tears Don't Fall came on, and I was just like, oh, I know this song! I know it! I know it! What is it? And he told me it's Bullet for My Valentine, yada yada yada. He had some other Bullet for My Valentine songs on there. And I was listening to him, and I was really getting into him, and it was awesome. And he showed me other bands and stuff, and that's where my music taste took off, you know. But when it comes to metal and punk and things like that, the vast majority of people don't like it, especially older folks. My parents, you know, nope, don't listen. That's bad. Don't listen to that. That's horrible music. I can't. My mom, at the very least, was understanding, though. She's like, well, my parents hated my music. My parents' parents hated their music. It's just generational. My dad was less understanding. But because my mom was awesome, she's like, yeah, you can listen to it just as long as I don't have to listen to it. And as long as there are no bad words. But it brings up a really interesting point, because from my perspective, the world, or mainstream, the mainstream world in general, attacked my music first. And so I felt somewhat like a victim in this regard, you know? I felt like I was a part of this big group of people who liked this music, who were unjustly attacked, and people would just say, oh no, it's garbage, that's not real music, it's just screaming, it's just yada yada yada, whatever people say. And because of that, again, I felt like a victim, and so I put myself in there, and so that made me very defensive. It made me very, like, really, I would snap. Not snap necessarily, but I would be quick to jump to the defense of my music and why I liked it. And, you know, at 14, 15, 16 years old, my arguments for why my music I thought it was better were not the best, and I wasn't the most understanding or accepting. But it's also around this time that, because of that, I started disliking pop music a lot. Because, you know, you gotta draw up sides. Heaven forbid we should like multiple genres of music. But you know how kids are. You know how teenagers are. And so, I looked at it like I was a victim here. But in the course of trying to prove the superiority, quote unquote, of my music, I ended up attacking a lot of other people's types of music. Specifically my sister's. Because my sister likes more pop music. Again, she, you know... But, you know, my sister was a defender, and I think it was less that she liked the music that she was listening to, so much that she was just annoyed with me being an elitist butthole. Which is fair, I don't like elitist buttholes either. But, so, I would complain about this music, right? I complain about this music, pop music, and then she would jump, and so now she feels attacked. She feels like her music is being attacked. She feels like the group that she identifies with is being attacked. Now she's a victim, so she attacks back. And then I attack back, and then we get into an argument, and she's actually smarter than I am, so she usually comes out on top in arguments. But I was thinking about this the other day, mostly in the context of politics and victimhood. And despite what a lot of people like to say, we like being victims. We like feeling that we are in the right, that the other person attacked first. That we were just going about our business, we weren't doing anything, and then somebody just for no reason came up and attacked us because they're horrible, bad people. So, but the question always remains, who started the fight? like again, with using the example of me liking metal and being nasty to people who aren't metal fans, who started this fight? Now, you could say I started the fight because I was being an elitist butthole, and say people like my sister were just reacting and defending themselves. But in my head, it was the world in general, mainstream culture, my parents. They were the ones who attacked my music first. They're the ones who said, your music is not real music, it's trash. How dare you listen to that? I mean, we can't stop you from listening to it because everyone's entitled to their opinions, but that's not real music. So I felt like I was, in a sense, being attacked. I felt like I was a victim here. And the rest of the world was my enemy. But again, who started that? I'd imagine in the case of metal... See, but that's the thing. Metal, did it start kind of like punk? Because punk started as just a reaction against some of the more metal, actually. Punk is a reaction against metal. It's funny that they ended up coming together and being my favorite type of music. But punk started as a middle finger to all the high quality, the high production, the high production, the polish of rock music in the 70s. I remember I took a history of rock and roll class back years ago. So, but again, who started this fight? Honestly, I don't really know. And does it really matter who started it? In the case of music, it started decades ago, this whole trend. I mean, again, like I said, my mom was understanding for me because her parents hated her music, and my grandparents' parents didn't like their music, and that's just a thing that happens. And I'm fully aware that my children will hate my music, and I will hate theirs. It's just life. That's how it goes. But again, who started it? Who started it? And is there any value in trying to figure out who started it in the first place? I mean, there could be in certain situations, like when you're talking about like actual collateral damage maybe, or something that you can measure with knowing who was the first offender, like in a car crash. You know, who started it is actually an important question. But something like music, or in the case of politics, political. You know, who started all of this fighting? Does it matter? And the next question is if it doesn't matter, or even if it does. We know fighting is bad. So the next question is, who's dragging it out? Because in the case of myself, I was kind of dragging it out. I was very quick to be critical of music that wasn't my music. And yet, deep down, if you had asked me at the time, my goal wasn't to be contrarian. I didn't like my music because I wanted to be contrarian. I just liked my music because I liked it. It was complex, intricate. It had so many sounds weaving in and out of itself. It expressed so many emotions, so many very powerful emotions that you don't find in pop music. I mean, people ask me, how is it that you can like metal? How do you like the screaming? Well, actually, first they usually say is, you can't even understand what they're saying, so how do you like that? And then I just look at them and say, well, did you like Gangnam Style back in the day? What about Despacito? Do you know what they're saying there? Most of the time they go, oh, no, I don't. Say, exactly. The second thing is, you know, but it's screaming. How do you get past the screaming? It's just grating on the ears, and then I ask, so my argument to that would be, well, I mean, why do people scream? First answer is maybe they're scared. When you scream when you're scared, Maybe you're in pain. You know, if you get hit by something really hard, or like, say somebody got stabbed, you just, ah! You know? And so there's a very negative connotation with screaming, which in general, metal and hardcore punk, not the brightest and happiest genres of music, so you'd understand that there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of dark, sad, bad emotions, but people scream when they're happy. Wah, 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 ha, 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 ha. Oh dang, 5 people. I mean, people scream when they're happy, right? I mean, When you go to a sports game, everyone's cheering. They are screaming. That's a scream when you're... Oh, whoa, I got you. Whoa, yeah, when your boy ain't right. But you can scream when you're happy. Like, again, at a sports game, when the guys you're rooting for make an amazing play, or something awesome happens, you're just like, yeah! Woo! Or if you're just feeling pumped up, you're just like, yeah! Oh! You know, people actually scream for all sorts of emotions. The common thread among everything is that whatever they're feeling, it's powerful. Very powerful emotion that moves them to release it in a big, you know. And that is the inherent appeal for me of the screaming in the metal or the hardcore punk. Whatever emotions they're expressing, it's powerful. It's moving. And then the other thing that it does for me is when you listen to hardcore punk guys and metal guys scream, I remember thinking when I was first getting into it, I said, wow, this does not sound like a human scream. They do not sound like people. They sound like demons. You know, that would scare a lot of people, but for me, I thought that was awesome. I was like, obviously there's some sort of training or practice going on in here, because you can't just do that. People do say, well, it's just screaming, but it's not just screaming. It's a special kind of screaming. And I feel like everybody can hear that. It's just when people who don't like it get on and they start talking about it, that's what they say to diss on it, you know. But, again, so I was impressed when I was younger by the scream and how technical it was and how it was not just something that you could pick up and do. But I was also impressed by the force of emotion. That's what appealed to me, I think. But again, enough about that. Going back to the original topic, which is victimhood. Who started it, and who's dragging it on? I mean, I certainly was dragging it on, but I didn't see it that way. I simply just saw it as defending my own position. But then when I would, you know, when I'd hear a pop song come on, and I'd say, hey, I'd rather listen to something different, and somebody say, Brian, we don't like your music. And then I'd be all upset. I'd be like, how dare you? And so then I would go on the offensive, because the best defense is a good offense. So somebody says. But then, the person, in my eyes, I was being defensive, but to the eyes of the person that I was talking about, now all of a sudden this elitist butthole comes out of nowhere and is attacking their music. And so to make this broader, I like applying this to the political part of it specifically. So there's the left and the right, and it just frustrates me because everyone's fighting and people blame, you know, an event can happen. I'm trying to think of something. Something fairly innocuous. Like President Trump. Let's talk about freaking President Trump. He's divisive as all heck. Oh, here we go. Okay, so I live in Utah, and our Senator Mitt Romney just got after, you know, had some tweets or something about President Trump and how he's not happy with the president and his efforts to get other countries to get dirt on his political enemies or whatever. And of course lines get drawn up and people take sides. And now we're at a fight. Who started it? Who started this fight, you know? Was it President Trump for doing the things that he did? I mean, you could say that. And some people, a lot of the people I know, do say that. It's like President Trump was being a bad person, and that's why. But then the Trump supporters look at it, say, it wasn't even that big of a deal. He wasn't doing anything illegal, or he blah, 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 blah. You know, they make their excuses for him. And to them, here come these Romney supporters, or here comes Mitt Romney out of nowhere, and just attacks. So now they get all defensive. And then they fire back. And the people on the other side, the Mitt Romney supporters, they fire back, because now they're getting attacked. And now everybody feels like they're getting attacked, and they feel like they're a victim. You know? They feel like they're the ones in trouble. And so the fighting just goes. But what we need to do is we need to not be victims. Like, it's something that... Who started the fight? Depends on who landed the first blow. Or is the one who reacted to the first blow. Well, and as far as blow goes, that's the thing, though. Blow is such a... I feel like that's such a defined thing. Like, when you say blow in its original sense, you know, somebody who strikes somebody. But, which makes, you know, it's very obvious in the case of physical violence. Like, if whoever throws the first punch, they're the ones in trouble. Or, you know what, let's complicate that a little bit. So let's say you got two guys, they're arguing, they're angry at each other. Bit of a tangent, but... Oh, I guess that's what you were saying. Bit of a tangent. But yeah, let's complicate that. So you got two guys, they're arguing, and the one guy, to further establish comparison of the demon tree Cliff. What? Of the demon tree Clyphoth to the tree of knowledge of good and evil, partaking of the fruits of the Clyphoth. Oh, can I not read the whole comments? Just as it did for the tree of knowledge of good and evil, humanity had to die for Virgil to transform. Though, of course, one was physical. I can't see all of these comments, unfortunately, I don't think. Well, I apologize, my dude. I can't see them all. We'll discuss it afterward. I think you can. I don't know how, though. Check your phone. But if I do that, then I have to change the... Oh, here we go. To further establish the comparison of the demon tree Clyphoth to the tree of knowledge of good and evil, partaking of the fruits of Clyphoth came at the cost of the death of humanity, just as it did for the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Humanity had to die for Virgil to transform. Though, of course, one was a physical death, whereas the other was a spiritual one. Touché, that's interesting. Hey, if you guys are Devil May Cry fans, I didn't even realize that. That's way interesting. That's cool. But anyway, actually, it's not the whole comment. Then I cannot see the full comments. But anyway, to go back to complicated. So we got two guys, and they come to blows. Whoa! And the first guy throws the punch, right? But let's say he misses, right? And then guy number two comes back and decks it. Boom. So who is the one in trouble? Because you could say the guy who threw the first punch is in trouble. But he hasn't, in actuality, he has not actually caused any bodily harm. He may have intended to, but he didn't. The second guy, though, you could say is in the right here, but at the end of the day, who's the one that's going to have the hospital bill? Who's the one who needs to pay money to get his nose fixed, you know? And to me, that's not really so complicated, because again, it's a very Christian thing, and they talk about, especially Jesus Christ, he did attack, exactly. One of the things that Jesus talks about in the Sermon on the Mount, that people talk about his law as opposed to the law of Moses. The law of Moses was a very, like, practical, bare bones, like, we're looking at the actual results of the situation, you know. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, yada, yada, yada. But then Jesus comes and gives his thing, where it's more spiritual, it's more intention, you know. You've heard that it hath been said that, thou shalt not kill. I don't remember, but I say unto you, whoever is angry with his brother is in danger of hellfire. Or, you know, ye have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you, that he that looketh upon a woman to lust after her hath already committed adultery in his heart. So with that background, given my background in Christianity, I'm much more on the side of, even if the guy missed, if he intended to punch the dude, he's the one in trouble. He started the fight. The other guy is just defending himself. But where it gets way complicated is when we're in the realms of ideas. We're in the realms of words and talking and discussion. Because who started the fight? And when we're dealing with intentions, because that's what words are, is this person intending to do this? It's all in the head. And how do you distinguish, like, when one guy says something that he thinks is not offensive, but somebody else takes it as offensive, you know, yes, I mean, hurt feelings aside, it's... Hold on, I need a minute to think. So you got a guy, says something, doesn't intend for it to hurt anybody's feelings. But it does. Okay? But it does. Non-intention. So again, who's in the wrong here? Guy didn't have intention. Maybe he could have been more considerate. That's true. That's possible. But again, he didn't have the intention. But at the end of the day, the other guy, who also wasn't intending to start a fight, is offended and upset. I know it's very easy to just simply say, "We'll get over it." But you know, the ultimate point that I'm trying to get here is, it's okay to be a victim, but we need to be understanding, if that makes sense. So, I consider myself more right of center, personally, when it comes to a lot of things. But whenever I talk to somebody on the left, or whenever I consider, you know, what would I say if I was talking to somebody about these things, I argue in my head until I can't go any farther. And my goal, at least in my head, when I argue with myself and I go back and forth, is to try to get everybody to come to an agreement. So when somebody says free education, right? I would love free education. That would be great, considering that I'm going to school now. That would be awesome. So somebody comes and says, "Hey, let's have free education." All right, great idea. However, nothing's actually free. How do we propose that we get free education? Well, we need to give students money. Okay, where are we going to get the money from? Taxes. Okay. So we're going to tax. Whom are we going to tax? And how much? We'll tax this much. Okay, but why should we force people who have nothing to do with college, or have nothing to do with going to school, why should they have to be forced to pay for other people to go to school? That doesn't seem very fair. Then the argument on the other side is, well, as long as society as a whole is educated, if everyone in society is educated, and everyone is educated at a higher level, society becomes better. Okay? But at the same time, you're still saying, well, you're still forcing people to give up their money for something they don't necessarily want to give it up for. Is that right? Is that okay? You know? I don't think it is. It would better the community. It certainly would better the community. But again, at what cost? Is the betterment of the community enough to justify forcing people to pay money that they don't want to pay? At some point it does have to be. I mean, we have taxes. I think everybody would agree society is real nice. A social contract, like, shouldn't have to pay for public school. Exactly. Yeah. By that logic, they shouldn't. But again, at what point? Because, I mean, we all pay taxes so we can have government functioning, so we can have law enforcement to keep us safe, so we can have roads repaired, so we can have yada 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 yada. At what point? Drive a car or use the roads. Tax money is still going towards it. My money. Exactly. So at what point? At what point do the people as a whole, does the government, does it become right to force people who don't use those things to pay towards it? You know, it's way complicated. When do we define it? When do we put it here? When can we do that? But at the end of the day, again, going back to it, essentially what I'm trying to get at is there are arguments on both sides. As ridiculous as the other side may seem at times. That's why we can vote, exactly. As ridiculous as the other side can seem sometimes. And despite how obnoxious and idiotic a lot of the other side can be, there is a logic behind it. And if you pursue the logic, you can come up with interesting arguments that a lot of times just simply end up being a matter of perspective. To some people, socialism is a great idea. Yes, everybody is forced to pay money, but we get free healthcare, we get free college, we get yada 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 yada. But then that isn't as high a quality as if it was in a free market. True, but if you have a free market, who's to necessarily say that people will end up getting that, you know? And who knows? You can't see the future. You don't know. Oh shoot, it's already 30 minutes. thing. Ultimately, that's the thing I'm trying to get at, is everyone wants to be a victim, because then you're justified, and everyone wants to be justified, everybody wants to be on the right side. But be careful when talking to people, because there is a certain level of logic. And I feel like at the end of the day, if you can acknowledge the other side's... free is the right word? You'll have to tell me specifically in what context. I don't remember what I said. But at the very least, acknowledging the other side's logic. Because again, one of my favorite phrases is people want to be understood more than they want to be right. In general, I think that's true, although I know a couple of people that I don't think that's necessarily true. They would much rather be right. But if you can acknowledge and you can see, I understand your position, I understand your logic, and it is a sound, what's the word? Path of logic, I guess you could say. Maybe we should say that things will be provided, healthcare. It's not free. It's here if you want it. Well, but again, you have to make somebody pay for it. And the people who are forced to pay for it might not want to pay for it. But again, maybe it does benefit society, so maybe it's worth it, maybe it's not. Again, we all vote and we decide that. But so ultimately, just understand the other side's logic. Work with them, talk to them, and understand them first. And understand them not even necessarily so you can prove them wrong, because that just makes people upset. If they feel like you're just trying to understand them so you can take their argument and throw it back at them and defeat it, people don't like that, because what they feel like is they're not being understood, they're just being argued with. So you need to understand and be, yes, I get it. That makes sense. Even sometimes if it's great, because that disarms people, and then they are more open to listening to what you have to say. And then, when they're open, you can present them with your ideas, and then they can weigh them and go over it. And if at the end of the day they're open to your ideas, and they take them, and they chew on them, and they compare them, and they still are like, nah, man, I don't like it, well, then there's really no convincing them. So, why waste your breath? Okay. Well, I'm going to call that good. This one was a little more all over the place. I didn't have enough time to sit down and think about things and see where I wanted to go with it beforehand. But normally I do 2 topics, and this one was only 1, which is great, because that means I got more material next week. So, to those people who stuck around, I don't know if Shane counts for 2 of them still, but that's awesome. Thank you, Tariki, for stopping by. And those couple other people who hopped on for a little bit and then left. Sure. And anybody who might be watching this later as its own standalone video. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see y'all later.